A few weeks ago, my boyfriend and I were at a GameStop reserving our copy of a certain video game. There was this new girl who seemed nervous, incredibly knowledgeable. We got into a conversation about Portal because I was wearing my Companion Cube shirt and ended up talking for an hour while my boyfriend pursued the video games. We got to chatting and had numerous things in common. It just so happened she was studying animation at the same school I was. She took down my name on Facebook, and that evening we were friends. We were going to have lunch the next day. So by looking at her Facebook, I realized she was incredibly obsessed with SpongeBob. Her heading picture was SpongeBob and Patrick. It was the only thing listed under shows. Everything she liked had to do with SpongeBob, and she had pictures with costume characters, and one was Steven Hellenberg at a Comic-Con or something. The next day at school, I had an hour until my next class. I finished all my homework, and I was on my laptop talking to her on Facebook. She said she couldn't make it because she had to meet some guy off Craigslist who was selling her some real SpongeBob memorabilia. Some guy whose recently deceased father knew Hellenberg. She told me he probably needed the money for rent or meth. Unwilling to let her meet some random tweaker off Craigslist alone, I insisted I join her. She told me to meet them in 15 minutes near a nearby Burger King. She was the first one there, and she was sitting inside eating. I ordered a milkshake and chat with her. We chatted a little bit before the guy met us. He was disappointingly normal singing. He looked about 23 and was dressed professionally and was carrying a baby carrier. He apologized for being late, but he told us he had to pick up his daughter. He handed us a shopping bag full of signed posters, DVDs, and framed drawings. She handed him $6 and looked through her new treasures to verify they're valid. Everything looked good except for a burnt case in a DVD saying, New SpongeBob. He said he didn't know what it was, but it was probably from the editing room. A first draft or something, he said. She rolled her eyes and we left. I asked him why he was letting all this go. He told me it reminded him of his father too much. That Friday, she invited me to come over and watch her new DVDs. I had nothing to do, so I went over. Of course, her one-bedroom apartment was wall-to-wall with SpongeBob. She seemed to have every SpongeBob product on the planet, from her rugs to her ceiling fans to her soap to her shower curtains. She told me it was her dream to live in Bikini Bottom, and if she couldn't live there, she wanted to help create it. We finally poured some wine and sat down to watch the 5 new retail copies of Director's Cut SpongeBob DVDs she bought. She pointed out every slight difference there was. Some of the colors were different, and some scenes went on longer. But it fascinated her. When we were finished with them, it was already 1 in the morning, and I noticed the burnt DVD on the coffee table. I asked if she wanted to see it, if it was just really quick, and then call it a night. We put the DVD in. Before the episode, it played a movie countdown. It played Best Day Ever, the one where all SpongeBob's plans are ruined. The audio and video were quality. The only thing there was be a pop once in a while, like someone edited a picture for a single frame. It took a while to sync the pause buttons with the pictures, but what I found was truly disturbing. There were pictures of different children. They all looked about 6 or 7 and had been badly beaten. We thought maybe someone paid the neighborhood kids to wear bruise makeup for this sick gag. The pictures stopped popping out and the episode continued as usual. She told me to take it out, that it was a fake and therefore so was everything else she had purchased. However, what we found next was a little more serious. The next episode on the disc was The Gift of Gum. This time I noticed the audio sounded like it was slightly distorted. There were more frames I paused and looked at. This time the kids were just in their underwear, badly beaten and crying. I skipped the episode and went to the last episode on the DVD, which was just bizarre. It almost looks like a popular creepypasta that I had found later described. It looked like badly drawn fan art with red smudges all over it. It started out with no audio. Squidward played his clarinet apparently very badly, and SpongeBob and Patrick played down below. And Squidward yelled at them to stop making so much noise from what I could gather without sound. SpongeBob talks with Patrick, and they proceed to walk away. The scene cut to Squidward at a concert playing with a bunch of ghoulish-looking Bikini Bottom residents with glowing bloody eyes. The animation was by this time a little better, but there was still no sound until the audience started to boo. It sounded like one guy stacked his voice 50 times. It made me jump. SpongeBob stood at the front of the stage, pointing and booing with glowing, hyper-realistic red eyes. The scene cut to Squidward on his bed, looking very depressed and realistic. The background of his room looked like a photograph. Then, faintly in the background, I heard a small wail, like a children crying. It synced with Squidward's crying. The sound got louder and louder until we had to mute the TV. The pops came back. This time they were incredibly disturbing. I really didn't want to go into much detail about them, but let's just say they were a good deal more grisly than the ones that had been previously posted, and there were more than just 2. Needless to say, the children I saw in the early episodes were dead, gutless, and limbless. I wanted to take it out and destroy it, but I had to see what this was. I had to know that this was a sick joke and those children were all right. But I continued watching it. It was more than just a badly drawn Squidward crying. I unmuted her TV, and there was these horrible noise that sounded like a combination of static, a hurricane, screaming children, and laughing. I put it on mute again. Squidward stared straight ahead with his creepy bleeding eyes. I wondered what horrific noise had put behind this. I took it off mute, but it was silent. Then a booming voice said, "Do it." Squidward took a shotgun and blew his head off. Then the usual credits began to roll. The color had gone out of my friend's face, and she was shaking. I told her it was all some demented hoax. The guy who sold it to her probably had something against SpongeBob for some reason and was messing with the fans. Then she tried to call the guy who sold it to her. Apparently his phone was disconnected. She told me to just go home and that she'd see me Monday at school. I asked her if maybe she would want to stay because she seemed pretty shaken up. She said she would deal with it in the morning. I stayed up all night watching silly YouTube videos, British sitcoms, anything that wasn't animation. I had to get my mind off it, but I just couldn't. I didn't have the attention span for a book, and I had eaten the contents of the refrigerator. The sun came up, and I had darted out to the house to her apartment. I banged on the door. No answer. A neighbor poked his head out of the window beside me. He had happened to be the manager. He told me she left. She took one suitcase and paid him the month's rent and hopped on a bus to the airport. We still haven't heard from her. But a few days, I read a cracked article about creepypasta, which led me to read about Squidward's suicide episode. After reading the others, I was afraid of sounding cliché, but I just had to say something about it. I've done a lot of research, and there was nothing else on the subject but the creepypasta.